Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we are going to cover how to analyze a quantitative variable in more depth. This video is carrying on our last video on EDA, or exploratory data analysis. So basically, when you have a quantitative variable, as a refresher, this is when we are going to analyze the data using histograms or box plots. In this video, we're going to focus on the histogram, and the next video will go over box plots. So basically, at a high level, there are really three things that you want to pay attention to when you are analyzing your histogram. So the first thing is just the shape of the histogram. So basically, there are two kind of subcategories or two things that you want to keep in mind. You want to first look at the number of modes. And all that's really just a fancy way of saying like a peak. So basically, your data could be unimodal. And notice here we have this word uni, right, which just means one. So that literally means you're going to see one peak in your data. So it's going to look something like that. You could also have bimodal data. And again, notice you're going to see bi here, which means two. So this would be like two peaks. So that's going to look something like that. And then lastly, your data could just be uniform. And the word uniform just means the same, right? So this really means you're going to have no peaks. So your data would look something like that, right? It's just kind of going to be flat straight across with really no set obvious peak values. So the next thing you want to look at is you want to look at the skewedness. So this basically means, actually, let me just draw it out for you. So basically, your data could be symmetrical, which is probably the most obvious, right? It's just kind of evenly distributed around some central value. Your data could also be skewed right, which when you're first learning this, you may just have to almost memorize that it's kind of opposite what you may think, because skewed right data actually looks like that. So your peak is actually over towards the left. And then lastly, your data could be skewed left, which I'm sure you could guess that it's going to look something like that. So the peak is actually off to the right side. So just as a quick little recap, the first thing that you want to analyze is the shape, which means you want to describe your data based on how many modes it has. So is it unimodal, bimodal, or uniform? And by its skewedness. So is it symmetrical, is it skewed right, or is it skewed left? Okay, moving on here. So the second thing that we need to look at is all of the different measures of center. So as a refresher, basically we want to look at the mean, which is just the average value. And to find that, you basically add up all of your data points and divide by how many values you have. You also want to look at your median, which is just the middle value. And you want to look at the mode, which is just the most frequent value. Quick little side note, you can actually have more than one mode. So if your data was like, I don't know, 1, 1, 2, 2, you would have two modes. It would be 1 and 2 in that case. Okay, so you want to basically just calculate the mean, median, and mode of your data. And then lastly, the third thing you want to look at is the spread. So spread is literally just how spread out your data is. So first way of measuring that or analyzing that is to look at the variance or standard deviation. These are very related metrics. I'm not going to talk about these in depth on this video. However, basically, just to give you a little idea, if you had something with a low standard deviation, basically it would be your data would all be grouped really closely together. So an example of that would be, let's say you're looking at, I don't know, like the weight of chihuahuas, right? We would imagine that most chihuahuas weigh about the same amount, right? Maybe like, I don't know, like 5 pounds plus or minus, I'm just guessing. Whereas, let's say you were looking at the weight of all dogs. Well, dogs can range from Chihuahuas to Great Danes. So now you're looking at data that's going to be spread out from like, I don't know, 5 to like 150 pounds. So that data is going to be much wider, right? And it's going to have a flatter peak and just be more spread out. So this would be an example of a large standard deviation over there on the right. Other things you want to look for in terms of the spread, if you're doing a box plot, which we're going to talk more about in the next video, so I'm not going to go in depth on this one here, but I just did want to note it. You do want to look at the IQR, which is the interquartile range of your box plot, which is basically just Q3 minus Q1. And then lastly, you want to look at the range of your data, which is just the highest value minus the lowest value. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's do a quick recap. Okay, in this video, what did we learn? So we learned how to do EDA on a quantitative or numerical variable. Three main things you want to look for: the shape, the center, and the spread. For shape, you want to pay attention to how many peaks your graph has, or modes, and you want to pay attention to the skewedness. So is it around the center? Is it off to the right, or is it over to the left? You also want to look at the center itself, which means calculating mean, median, and mode and reporting those numbers. And finally, you want to look at the spread. So you want to look at the variance and standard deviation, potentially the IQR if you're doing a box plot, and the range, which is just the highest value minus the lowest value. All right, thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video where we talk more about box plots.